Hello everybody, Gigaraptor is actually back now, and we are going to be doing a C++ tutorial. Now first of all, listen to me very carefully. If this is your first language and you're visiting this C++ tutorial, I would not do C++. It's a difficult language and it's a very complex language as well, so you're better off starting with another language. So what I would do is I would go up to the YouTube search bar above and then type in Python tutorial, or you can find a lovely little PDF called Learn Python the Hard Way, which isn't, to be honest, that hard, and you will be able to learn Python, and then you can come back to this video and learn a more complex language, because frankly this is not something that beginners should be meddling with. So now that you all should be gone, if you're not, you're a retard. First of all, we need our tools. So here I am running a virtual machine of the Debian operating system with the LDXC desktop environment, but that's obviously no point mentioning that, but this is just to clear up what I'm doing. So with your running Linux, or for that matter any sort of Unix flavour, you're going to need to get the package for GCC, because that's the only really good sort of compiler you can get really for C++. So we're going to get it here. So we're going to want something called Build Essential. While you can get G++ separately, which is the GNU C++ compiler, it's probably recommended to get Build Essential for you're only really taking up. You're only taking up about 30 megabytes, and it gives you everything you need. And even if you want to go on to C later on, or for that matter beforehand, because C uses the GCC compiler which comes with that as well. So if you're running something like a default Linux distro, if you're running something like FreeBSD, and well, I'm not quite sure with Mac, I think it comes with a package manager, I'm not sure, you'll want to get that. Maybe not something quite like Xcode, or if you're on Windows, Microsoft Visual Studio. You don't really want to be mucking around with that, mainly because I'll be using G++ rather on this. I'm not going to be using GCC because that's a C compiler. We're going to be using G++ here, and sometimes they differ in how they function. Same also goes for the Intel compilers. While that is very good for people who have learnt the language because it optimizes very well, if you're on Windows, you're not going to be able to get it in the same way as, say, someone on Linux by typing something into command line like I've just shown. You're going to need to go to this website, and you're going to look for something called MinGW, which stands for Minimalist GNU for Windows, which is all the compilers you could ever want, G++ and all that. So you download it here. I don't think I need to show you how to download it, and I don't think I need to show you how to set up advanced sort of variables like path on your Windows system, because if you're doing C++, you should probably know your system inside out as it is, which I will probably prove wrong. But anyway, we're doing it here. I've shown you how to install it, but first of all this is just a fresh machine, so I'm going to create a new thing. So we're going to go, wait, really? We're going to go into Giga, which is obviously our user directory, and we're going to create our directory called programming, which will contain all the tutorials. So we're going to call this tutorial 1, and it's basically just going to demonstrate how to do a hello world in it, which maybe I should have gone into that directory first. Yeah, I should have. Oh well, I'm just going to type 1 and we'll do it from there, and I can move it around later on. So what you're going to want to do originally is, this is sort of a hot topic actually, I think I should get onto this. The discussion between using an IDE or a text editor and compiler. I'm using the latter because I believe it's a valuable learning experience to be able to make files and things like that, and I think really it makes it a little bit easy, and it sort of robs you of the full picture of what you're actually making, because with writing a makefile, it allows you to see the compilation and the linking steps that are done under the compiler, and it's necessary to have an understanding of the hardware in that sort of way. So we're going to be doing it with that. IDEs are easier to use, so you could download something like Code Blocks, because that uses MinGW to compile C and C++ code, and you could follow along with this tutorial just fine. However, we're going to be using GNU Nano, which comes by default with Debian and pretty much all other, I think it's all other Linux systems, with a couple of exceptions. Maybe things like Gentoo and Arch Linux don't come with it, but it's basically the default text editor. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a file called main.py, .cpp. So this is our file that we're going to be writing all our code to. Now the first thing you've got to do with any program is specify if you're going to be including external libraries, and you probably will be, considering nowadays, unless you're writing in something like x86 assembly or something, you're going to want some external library support for pretty much everything. So what we're going to do is we're going to include something called iostream. Now iostream stands for input output stream, which is the main method of console input and output under C++. At least as you encounter originally. You can move on to other things and you can use the regular C libraries like I teach in my C tutorials, but we'll be using this because it's more C++y. It's not straightforward it's not straightforward as like using printf or something. It's more C++y. Aside from that, it's essentially identical, so we're going to go int main. This, for those of you who don't know, main is automatically called when you run a program. So for example, when I compile this, you don't have to tell it to, it will run main, and it will run all of the code that goes in within it. So how are we going to go about sort of displaying our text? And that's very simple. We're going to use something called std_cout. Now std is something called a namespace, and under this namespace there is something called cout, which obviously stands for console output under iostream, as I specified earlier. And to output with this, you use these here, and it specifies that we have our thing. So we're going to go hello world and /n. However, this /n thing means new line, so it will go down to another line. However, there is a different way of doing it as well, although this is definitely the preferred method. We can go like this, and we can call to our std namespace again and do end l. Now, for those who don't know, it is integral that you end every statement like this, with the exception of preprocessor directives like include and define and all of that, with a semicolon, because otherwise the compiler will complain. This is different from things like Python and BASIC if you've used them before, so it's worth noting. And it's also an integral component within many languages, like if you've done Java before, for example. And finally, note this here. This stands for integer, and it specifies that our main here is a function of the type integer, because it's functions based on statements within it. And in order for us to satisfy integer here, we need to write something called return 0, if we can spell return correctly. So return 0 essentially means that our main function gives a value of 0 to anything that's called it. However, since we're not really calling it within the program, we're not going to use it much. However, this matters outside of the program because the operating system can receive our return and act based on it. So this is essentially what makes up a basic C++ program. You will always have an include unless you're doing something seriously low level. And to be honest, there's no real point using C++ for that sort of thing. You're going to want to use C or maybe even x86 assembly, as I mentioned, if you're going to be doing stuff without a library. For things that I reckon 99.9% of you will be using, you'll want to include at least one thing. There may be the odd people among you who want to do operating system development, for example, and in that case you generally write your own libraries into this. But enough of dilly-dallying, let's save this and we're going to compile it. Now, to compile this, we do G++, which is our GNU C++ compiler, -O, and then we've got the name of our program, so we're going to call it hello main.cpp. It's going to compile, and it's compiled correctly. There's no warnings or anything, so we now have a program called hello, unless there's been a serious bug. Yes, see. And to run our program under Linux, well, obviously you just go like this, hello. Under Windows, obviously you click on it or just type hello into the command line, but you're going to probably want to run this through command line, so just type hello into the command line when you're in the relevant directory. So yeah, so you can see we've outputted hello world and gone down the line, so our program essentially functioned correctly. So thank you for watching this C++ tutorial, all of that. Like and subscribe if you liked it. That's great. I'll see you on the next episode of this, and we'll be discussing variables and other such simple things that are integral to any of the programs you plan on writing.